Kia ora koutou and good morning, everyone. Today is Mother's Day, a time to honour the women in our lives who have given birth to us, fed us, raised us, and cared for us. With this in view, our message today focuses on three women who acted in motherly ways. From Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 to 10, we read, Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the river bank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. May the Spirit of Jesus illuminate God's word for us. There's more than one way to be a mother. In this passage, we observe how three women all act as mothers for the same child. Moses' biological mother exercises creative faith. Moses' sister exercises courageous intercession. And Moses' adoptive mother exercises compassionate leadership. Let us begin with Moses' biological mother. There's a classic puzzle known as the 9 dots puzzle. The aim is to link all 9 dots using 4 straight lines without lifting the pen. What you discover after much time and frustration is that it's impossible to do this if you think inside the box. The only way you can do it is by drawing your lines outside the box. The 9 dots puzzle requires outside the box thinking. That is, thinking in a creative way. Moses' biological mother had a problem which required outside the box thinking. So what was the problem? Well, the king of Egypt, also known as Pharaoh, had issued a command to all his people to throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the River Nile. Pharaoh was basically instigating a policy of genocide or ethnic cleansing against the Israelites. In the opening verses of Exodus 2, we read how Moses' mum gave birth in the usual way, and she saw that her son was a fine child. There are echoes of the creation story here. In Genesis 1, on the 6th day of creation, we read, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. The Hebrew word translated as fine in Exodus 2 is the same word as good in Genesis 1. Can you see the connection? Moses' mother looked on her son and saw he was fine or good, just as God looked on his creation and saw that it was good. Although God's name is not mentioned in the story of Moses' birth, the reader is reminded of the creation story. Just as the Lord brought order to the chaos in the beginning at creation, so too he is bringing order to the chaos of Pharaoh's decree to murder Hebrew babies. Moses' biological mother cannot drown her own son, so she hides him as long as she can. This kind of in-the-box thinking was never going to be a permanent solution. It would soon become impossible to keep her child hidden. Let's pause for a moment and imagine what life was like for Moses' parents. Normally, the birth of a child is something to celebrate, but Moses' mum and dad could not share the good news with anyone. Presumably, Moses' mum tried to hide the fact she was pregnant in the first place. Then there was the difficulty of giving birth as quietly as possible, not to mention the constant stress of trying to keep the baby from crying once he was born. Parenting a newborn baby is difficult at the best of times. Just imagine how exhausted and on edge Moses' parents must have been trying to protect their son with a death sentence dangling over his head. Moses' mum is a smart lady. She knows that hiding her son is not sustainable. If Moses is to have a chance, she needs to think outside the box, and this is the creative solution she comes up with. Moses' mum took a basket, covered it with tar to make it watertight, and set it among the reeds of the Nile with her baby in it. Moses' mum didn't just throw her son into the Nile to see if he would sink or swim. No, she put him in a watertight vessel and nestled him in the calm part of the river, among the reeds, where he was likely to be found by someone, hopefully someone kind. By doing this, Moses' mum was exercising creative faith. Creative faith is not blind faith. Creative faith is smart faith, faith that thinks outside the box for the well-being of others, faith that is as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves, faith that provides doorways for our kids, giving them the best possible chance in life. There were no guarantees with the plan. In fact, there was a lot that could go wrong, but it does no good to overthink the things we cannot control. Moses' mum did everything in her power to give her son the best chance she could, and she gave God an opportunity to act. This is what creative faith does. It gives God options. How many here have a younger brother or sister? Being an older sibling comes with responsibility. Indeed, the eldest child in the family normally possesses a stronger sense of responsibility than others. We often find ourselves in a parenting role for our younger siblings. It shapes us. Moses' biological mum was not the only woman who provided care for Moses. Moses' sister also played a mothering role in her brother's life by exercising courageous intercession. Intercession comes from a Latin word that simply means to go between. An intercessor intervenes on behalf of another person, acting as the go-between or the advocate for someone else. Eleanor Roosevelt, wife of US President Franklin Roosevelt, was a courageous intercessor. She was vocal in her support of the African American civil rights movement. Eleanor opposed her husband on this issue by becoming one of the only voices in the Roosevelt administration, insisting that benefits be equally extended to Americans of all races. Oskar Schindler, an Austrian-born industrialist, was another courageous intercessor. He intervened not with words but with actions to save 1,200 Jews during the Holocaust of the Second World War. He did this by creative, out-of-the-box thinking, employing Jews in his enamelware factory and bribing SS officials to look the other way. Eleanor Roosevelt and Oskar Schindler were people of power. Their intercession was courageous in the context of the times, but they interceded from a position of relative privilege. Moses' sister did not enjoy such power or privilege, which made her intercession all the more courageous. In verse 4, we read how Moses' sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to her baby brother. Unlike Cain, who killed his brother Abel, Moses' sister watched over her brother for good. As an older sibling, she had a strong sense of responsibility. She was her brother's keeper. When Moses' sister saw that Pharaoh's daughter had taken pity on the baby, she found the courage to speak up and intercede for Moses, saying, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" What an incredibly brave thing to do. Moses' sister was a lowly slave girl, while Pharaoh's daughter was among the powerful elite. And yet, Moses' sister was suggesting to Pharaoh's daughter that she break the law and go against her father. Moses' sister could have wound up in a lot of trouble for even talking to the king's daughter, let alone encouraging civil disobedience. It was a huge risk. But Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Moses' sister acted as an intercessor, a go-between, fetching Moses' mother. This resulted in Moses' mother being paid to nurse her own son. I invite you to pause and reflect in silence for a moment. Who has interceded for good in your life? Bring that person to mind. How did it make you feel when you learned they had your back? If it's a good feeling, sit with that feeling for a while. Is there someone who needs you to intercede for them? There is more than one way to be a mum. Moses' biological mum exercised creative faith. Moses' sister exercised courageous intercession. And Moses' adoptive mum, the princess of Egypt, exercised compassionate leadership. God's deliverance often comes from unexpected quarters. Pharaoh's daughter is the one we least expect to save Moses. She is a pagan. She is the daughter of Israel's arch enemy, and she comes from a life of privilege. We might expect her to be so self-absorbed that she doesn't even notice the baby, or if she did notice him, so blindly loyal to her father that she would leave the child to drown. But this princess's behavior topples our prejudice. Some commentators observe that God is parallel to Pharaoh's daughter here. We wouldn't normally associate God Almighty with a princess, much less a pagan princess whose dad is a homicidal maniac. And yet this is what we find in Exodus 2. The Lord Yahweh is not mentioned in Moses' birth narrative, but we see his image reflected in the way Pharaoh's daughter responds to the situation with compassionate leadership. Verse 6 tells us that when the princess opened the basket and saw the baby crying, she felt sorry for him. This feeling sorry for him goes deeper than superficial sentimentality. She demonstrates genuine compassion for Moses. Compassion is a feeling of empathy which moves a person to an act of mercy. Compassion doesn't just feel sorry for the poor, compassion does something to help the poor. Jesus' whole ministry was an act of compassion. In Matthew 9, we read, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, for the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Jesus didn't just feel sorry for people. He was moved to heal people and show them a better way to live. The interesting thing here is that Jesus drew others into the work of compassion with him. Indeed, he encourages us to pray for God to send more workers to help with the heavy lifting of compassion. In verse 9 of Exodus 2, Pharaoh's daughter says to Moses' mother, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. Pharaoh's daughter shows double compassion here. Compassion in saving the baby Moses, and also compassion for a struggling Hebrew family. Pharaoh had subjected the Hebrew people to slave labor, but Pharaoh's daughter does not agree with slavery. She wants to be fair and pay the workers. Notice the connection with Jesus here. Just as Jesus invites others to help him in the work of compassion, so too Pharaoh's daughter draws together a team of people to care for baby Moses. Pharaoh's daughter takes the risk of going against her father's command and makes a long-term commitment to provide for Moses. She eventually adopts Moses as her own son, thus saving his life. This act of compassionate leadership is at the same time an example of courageous intercession. God is parallel to Pharaoh's daughter in this chapter. At the end of Exodus 2, we read how the Israelites cried out to God under their slavery, and the Lord heard their cry and was concerned for them. Just as the princess was moved with compassion by the cry of the Hebrew baby, so too God is moved with compassion by the cry of his people. And just as Pharaoh's daughter was faithful in adopting Moses as her own son, so too God provides for our adoption through Christ. In Galatians 4 we read, "But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Because you are his sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, 'Abba, Father.' So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are his child, God has made you also an heir." Through faith in Jesus, we are adopted into God's family. We are royalty. The name Moses is actually an Egyptian name, probably meaning son, but it sounds like the Hebrew word to draw out. Just as Pharaoh's daughter drew Moses out of the Nile, so too God will draw Israel out of slavery in Egypt. Moses' deliverance by the hand of Pharaoh's daughter foreshadows Israel's deliverance by the hand of Yahweh. The princess's compassionate leadership and courageous intercession remind us that not all the Egyptians are bad. We cannot judge a group by one member of that group. The actions of Pharaoh's daughter also remind us that God's people don't have the monopoly on compassion. God is free to work with and through whoever he wants. As is so often the case, the Lord begins his work of redemption quietly, unobtrusively, under the radar, often through the creativity, courage, and compassion of those we least expect. In Israel's case, God sowed his seeds of salvation through women. We see God's sense of humor here. There is considerable irony in Pharaoh's policy of killing the sons and preserving the daughters. As it turned out, the daughters were far more dangerous than the sons. May the Lord bless you.